There is a nuisance clogging your gutters right now that contains more vitamin C than a crate of oranges, not per pound, per serving. You rake it into plastic bags every autumn. You pay landscapers to haul it away. You curse it when it sticks to your windshield and clogs your drainage pipes. And while you do this, you drive to the pharmacy and spend $20 on a bottle of synthetic ascorbic acid manufactured in a factory overseas. The pine needle is not yard waste. It is a survival tool that kept entire civilizations alive through brutal winters when citrus was an impossible dream. The supplement industry generates $35 billion annually by convincing you that vitamin C comes from tropical fruits you cannot grow. Meanwhile, the real source grows free in your backyard, on public land, along every highway, in every climate zone from Alaska to Florida. They cannot patent a pine needle. They cannot control a resource this abundant. So they taught you to throw it away instead. The year is 1535. Jacques Cartier and his crew are frozen into the ice of the St. Lawrence River near what is now Quebec. They have been trapped for months. Scurvy is killing them. Their gums are bleeding. Their teeth are falling out. Their skin is covered in hemorrhages as blood vessels rupture beneath the surface. 25 men are already dead. The rest are too weak to bury them. They have no citrus. They have no fresh vegetables. They have nothing but salted meat and despair. Then the Iroquois intervene. They show Cartier a tree they call Aneda, the tree of life. They instruct him to strip the needles from the branches, crush them, and brew them into a bitter tea. Within days, the dying men begin to recover. Within weeks, they are healthy enough to continue their expedition. Cartier wrote in his journal that this remedy was a miracle, that it worked faster and more completely than any medicine he had ever witnessed. The tree was the eastern white pine. The medicine was free. The pharmaceutical industry did not exist yet to tell him this was impossible. This was not an isolated discovery. Humans have been using evergreen needles for respiratory support, immune function, and general vitality for at least 4,000 years. Tibetan monks brewed pine needle tea in the high Himalayas where no fruit could grow. Siberian tribes survived winters that would kill a modern person in hours by relying on conifer preparations. Native American nations across the continent used different species for different ailments, but the core knowledge was universal. The evergreen was medicine. The needle was the delivery system. This information was never lost. It was simply replaced by a more profitable alternative. Consider what you have been taught about vitamin C. Oranges, lemons, grapefruit. Tropical fruits that require warm climates, massive irrigation, pesticide applications, refrigerated transport, and controlled distribution networks. A single orange contains roughly 70 milligrams of vitamin C. A single cup of pine needle tea contains up to 400 milligrams. That is not a marginal difference. That is a 5-fold increase from a source that grows wild, requires no cultivation, survives in freezing temperatures, and costs absolutely nothing. But vitamin C is only the beginning. Pine needles contain a compound called shikimic acid. If that name sounds familiar, it should. Shikimic acid is the primary precursor used to manufacture Tamiflu, the antiviral medication that governments stockpile for pandemic preparedness. Pharmaceutical companies extract it from star anise at enormous expense. It exists in pine needles at concentrations high enough to brew in your kitchen. There is also suramin, a compound that has been used in medical contexts for over a century. The needles contain precursors to this substance in forms that researchers are only beginning to understand. You are raking a pharmacy into trash bags and paying someone to take it to the dump. The citrus industry is not a conspiracy. It is simply a business operating according to predictable economic logic. Oranges require specific growing conditions found in limited geographic regions. They require transportation infrastructure to move perishable fruit across continents before it rots. They require pesticides to protect monoculture crops from disease. They require marketing to convince consumers that this is the only legitimate source of an essential nutrient. A pine tree requires nothing. It grows in sand. It grows in clay. It grows in rocky soil where nothing else survives. It produces needles 12 months a year in climates where the ground freezes solid for half the annual cycle. You cannot build a supply chain around something this abundant. You cannot create artificial scarcity for a resource that blankets entire continents. You cannot charge premium prices for a product that anyone can harvest for free with no specialized knowledge or equipment. So, instead, the market created a narrative. Vitamin C comes from fruit. Everything else is folk medicine. The pines in your yard are landscaping problems to be managed, not resources to be utilized. This narrative has been so successful that most people alive today have never once considered brewing the needles falling on their lawn. The biology of the pine needle explains why it works so effectively. Most plants shut down metabolic activity when temperatures drop. They go dormant. They stop producing the compounds that make them nutritionally valuable. The pine does something different. It maintains active photosynthesis in sub-zero conditions. Its needles continue producing and storing volatile oils, antioxidants, and bioactive compounds through the entire winter. The waxy coating on each needle is not decorative. It is a preservation system. It locks in substances that would evaporate from any other leaf structure. Think of the pine needle as a battery that charges continuously and never discharges until you break the seal. When you crush those needles and steep them in hot water, you are releasing months of accumulated chemistry in a single cup. This is why pine needle tea tastes so intensely aromatic. That flavor is medicine expressing itself. Identification is critical. Not all conifers are safe, and the differences can be lethal. The eastern white pine is your primary target for tea preparation. It is also the easiest to identify with certainty. Use the bundle rule. White pine needles grow in clusters of 5, bundled together at the base. 5 needles. 5 letters in the word white. This is not a coincidence. It is a mnemonic device that foragers have used for generations. If you count the needles in a bundle and find 5, you have a white pine. Other safe species include Scots pine, Austrian pine, and most members of the Pinus genus. The danger comes from trees that look similar but are not pines at all. Yew is the primary threat. It has flat, individual needles that grow directly from the branch without bundling. Every part of the yew tree is toxic except the flesh of its red berries. Ingestion can cause cardiac arrest. Norfolk Island pine, commonly sold as a houseplant, is also unsafe for consumption despite its name. Ponderosa pine should be avoided by pregnant women due to compounds that can cause complications. When in doubt, stick to the 5-needle rule and harvest only from trees you have positively identified. Your life depends on accuracy. The preparation method matters as much as the identification. Never boil pine needles. Boiling destroys vitamin C through oxidation. It breaks down the volatile compounds that make the tea therapeutically valuable. You will end up with bitter brown water that has lost most of its potency. Instead, bring fresh water to a boil, then remove it from heat and let it cool for 30 seconds to 1 minute. The target temperature is around 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Add your needles to this hot but not boiling water. Use approximately 1 tablespoon of fresh needles per cup, or half that amount if using dried needles. Steep for 15 to 20 minutes with a cover over the vessel to trap the volatile oils that would otherwise escape as steam. The resulting tea should be pale yellow to light amber with a strong resinous aroma. It will taste like a forest smells. Some people add honey or lemon. Purists drink it straight. Both approaches deliver the compounds you are seeking. Harvesting follows simple, ethical guidelines. Take only what you need. Never strip a single branch bare. Distribute your harvest across multiple trees to minimize impact on any individual organism. The best needles for tea are the bright green new growth that appears in spring, soft and tender at the tips of branches. These contain the highest concentration of vitamin C and the mildest flavor profile. Mature needles work perfectly well, but produce a stronger, more resinous taste. Fallen needles that have naturally dropped after storms are also viable if they are still green and aromatic. Brown, dry, or brittle needles have lost their potency and should be left as mulch. Avoid harvesting from trees near roads where exhaust contamination accumulates. Avoid trees in areas that may have been sprayed with pesticides or herbicides. Avoid ornamental trees in commercial landscapes that are often treated with systemic chemicals. Find wild trees in forests, parks, or untreated private land. Find the trees that nobody manages. Those are the ones carrying medicine untouched by industrial chemistry. The pine needle represents something larger than a single remedy. It represents a category of knowledge that industrial economics has systematically devalued. Every time you look at a conifer, you are seeing a decentralized pharmacy that cannot be controlled, cannot be patented, cannot be monopolized, and cannot be priced out of reach for ordinary people. The supplement industry sells you isolation and scarcity. They extract single compounds from complex sources, synthesize them in laboratories, press them into tablets, and charge prices that guarantee profit margins. The pine tree offers integration and abundance. It provides dozens of compounds working together in ratios that evolution refined over millions of years, available to anyone willing to learn its name and respect its biology. One model creates dependence. The other creates sovereignty. One model requires you to be a perpetual customer. The other requires you to be a student for a single afternoon. The next time you see pine needles accumulating on your property, do not reach for the rake. Reach for a basket. Gather a handful of those green needles that everyone else treats as debris. Bring them inside. Heat your water. Steep your tea. Drink what Cartier's men drank when they were dying and had no other option. Drink what Tibetan monks drank at elevations where nothing else provided what their bodies needed. Drink what your ancestors knew was valuable before the market taught them to forget. You are not consuming a folk remedy. You are reclaiming a supply line that predates commerce itself. You are opting out of a system designed to make you dependent on products you do not need from sources you cannot control. This is not about pine needles. This is about recognizing that the world is filled with abundance disguised as inconvenience, not medicine disguised as mess, and value disguised as waste. Once you see it in the pine, you will start seeing it everywhere. And once you see it everywhere, you stop being a consumer. You become something the market cannot predict or contain. Subscribe now. The next forgotten medicine might be even closer than the tree outside your window.